You finish what you said you'd finish. You did what needed to be done. No procrastination. No excuses. And still, nothing lands. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Not pride. Just a strange, hollow quiet. It makes you wonder what's wrong with you. It makes you question whether you even want anything anymore. It makes you quietly fear that maybe you're incapable of feeling fulfilled. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If productivity leaves you empty, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means your brain learned something very specific about what you're allowed to be. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Most days, you move on autopilot. You wake up already behind. You think in lists. You measure yourself by output. Even rest becomes something you have to earn. You tell yourself, just finish this. Just get through today. Then I'll relax. But when, then, finally arrives, there's nothing waiting. So you scroll. You snack. You open another tab. You look for stimulation that doesn't ask anything from you. Not because you're lazy. Not because you lack discipline. But because the moment you stop producing, you don't feel like a person anymore. You feel undefined. And undefined feels unsafe. Over time, this shapes how you see yourself. You don't describe yourself by what you love. You don't describe yourself by what moves you. You describe yourself by what you handle. I'm the reliable one. I'm the productive one. I'm the one who gets things done. That sounds strong. But inside, it's lonely. Because if who you are equals what you produce, then who are you when you're still? Most people assume emptiness after productivity means they need bigger goals. Harder goals. More ambitious goals. More impressive outcomes. But chasing bigger output only deepens the same pattern. It's like pouring more water into a cup with a hole in the bottom. You don't need more to do. You need to understand what your brain associated with worth. Very early in life, your nervous system started tracking one simple equation. When I'm useful, tension goes down. When I perform well, conflict reduces. When I succeed, I get approval, space, or safety. Your brain doesn't analyze this philosophically. It records it biologically. Through dopamine. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. It's the learning chemical. It marks what leads to safety and survival. So if usefulness reduced emotional danger, your brain quietly coded, being productive keeps me safe. Not happy. Safe. That distinction explains almost everything. Safety brings relief. Relief feels like a release of pressure. But relief is not fulfillment. Relief is the absence of threat. Fulfillment is the presence of meaning. Your brain learned how to remove threats. It never learned how to generate meaning. So when you finish a task, dopamine spikes briefly. Not as celebration, but as confirmation, good. You're still acceptable. Then it fades. And you're left at baseline. Neutral. Which feels empty when you were expecting something warm. It's like holding your breath all day and calling the exhale happiness. You're not actually experiencing joy. You're experiencing the moment danger disappears. That's why productivity feels calming, but never nourishing. Over time, another adaptation forms. Your brain starts conserving emotional energy around achievements. Because when rewards are predictable and pressure-based, the brain dampens emotional response. Why waste energy celebrating what must happen to survive? So accomplishments stop registering. Wins feel flat. Milestones feel distant. Not because you don't care, but because caring was never the purpose of the behavior. Survival was. This creates a very specific identity. Not consciously chosen, but neurologically shaped. A performance-based identity. You don't feel like someone who exists. You feel like someone who operates. You become a machine with thoughts. Efficient. Capable. Quietly disconnected. And when the machine powers down, you feel empty. Not because nothing is inside you, but because nothing inside you has been allowed to speak. Most people try to fix this by forcing gratitude, forcing excitement, forcing positive thinking. That rarely works. Because the brain doesn't change through language. It changes through repeated experience. You don't talk yourself into new wiring. You show your nervous system new evidence. And that starts small. Smaller than you want. The first shift is learning to separate completion from meaning. Right now, your brain treats finishing and value as the same thing. Task done equals worth confirmed. You begin interrupting that equation. When you finish something, you pause for 10 seconds. Not to celebrate. Not to judge. Just to notice. This is finished. Then quietly, did this matter to me? Or did I just do it because it was required? No right answer. The point isn't to feel inspired. The point is to activate the part of your brain that evaluates personal relevance. Most people never use that system. They live entirely inside obligation. This tiny pause starts teaching your brain, not all output equals meaning. That alone changes the emotional texture of your day. The second shift is giving your brain experiences of reward that have no productive purpose. This feels uncomfortable at first. Almost wrong. Because your nervous system expects reward to follow effort. But you deliberately introduce moments where reward follows presence. One song. 1 cup of tea. 1 minute of sunlight. No optimization. No stacking. No self-improvement angle. Just sensing. What this does neurologically is critical. It trains dopamine to respond to experience instead of anticipation. Right now, most of your dopamine fires before completion. Chasing. Reaching. When you practice presence-based reward, dopamine begins firing during. Here. Not later. That's the difference between living and postponing. The third shift is learning to name internal states without fixing them. Most of your life, sensations were problems. Tired. Fix it. Restless. Distracted. Empty. Fill it. But labeling changes how the brain processes emotion. When you silently say, "This is emptiness," you move activity from raw emotion centers into language and observation networks. Intensity drops. Not because the feeling disappears, but because it's no longer fused with identity. You're not empty. Emptiness is passing through you. That distinction creates space. And space is where choice becomes possible. The fourth shift is building identity anchors unrelated to output. Your brain currently recognizes one answer to: who am I? Someone who gets things done. You introduce additional answers. Quiet ones. Simple ones. I'm someone who notices patterns. I'm someone who values honesty. I'm someone who feels deeply. You don't need proof. You don't need consistency. You're not convincing yourself. You're orienting yourself. Over time, this grows neural pathways associated with self-concept beyond performance. You become more than a function. The final shift is allowing unfinished days to exist. Not as punishment. Not as collapse. But as neutral. Days where you do essentials and stop. No catching up. No compensating tomorrow. This teaches your nervous system something radical: nothing terrible happens when I'm not maximizing. Safety still exists. This weakens the old equation. Slowly. Gently. But permanently. Think of it this way. You have two internal systems. One designed for survival. One designed for aliveness. You've mastered survival. That's not a failure. That's an achievement. Now you're learning a second language. The language of being. Not through grand transformations. But through repeated permission. Permission to pause. Permission to feel. Permission to exist without proving. You don't need to become a different person. You don't need a new personality. You don't need to be fixed. You were never empty because you lacked depth. You were empty because depth was never required. Only usefulness was. And the moment usefulness stops being the sole requirement, something very quiet begins to return. Not fireworks. Not constant joy. But a subtle sense of presence. A sense of inhabiting yourself. That's real fulfillment. Not the high after achievement. Not the relief after pressure. But the steady feeling, I'm here. Even when nothing is being completed. Even when nothing is being optimized. Even when you're just breathing. And that is enough.